In 1938, an advertising executive in New York was handed an impossible task: convince an entire generation to spend 2 months of their salary on a rock that, chemically speaking, is just compressed carbon, the same element found in pencil lead and coal. Not because it was rare. It isn't. Rubies are rarer. Even other colors of diamond are rarer than the clear white ones sitting in every jewelry store window in America. But by the time that ad campaign was finished, it didn't matter what the truth was, because the company behind it didn't just sell you a stone, they sold you a rule. The rule that a real proposal requires a diamond. The rule that its size should cost 2 months of your salary. The rule that this and only this is what forever looks like. That company was De Beers, and at the peak of its power, it controlled up to 90% of every diamond mined on Earth, not through force, through something far more effective: 100-year masterclass in manufacturing scarcity, and then manufacturing desire to match it. Here's what almost nobody realizes: the diamond in your ring isn't valuable because it's rare. It's valuable because one company spent a century making absolutely sure you'd never find out otherwise. And right now, in 2026, that century-old empire is being sold off, piece by piece, with entire governments racing each other to buy control of it. In this case study, we're decoding the empire behind the ring, the man who built the cartel, the ad campaign that rewired human romance, the cracks that finally broke a 90% monopoly, and why, right now, the nation of Botswana is fighting to buy the crown jewel of an empire built on a lie that made billions. This isn't a story about jewelry. This is the strategy behind the scarcity, the economics, the psychology, and the century-long campaign that convinced the world a diamond is forever. Welcome to Empire Blueprint. This is the $80 billion lie. By the end of this, you'll never look at an engagement ring the same way again. To understand this empire, you have to go back to 1888 and a British mining magnate named Cecil Rhodes. Rhodes founded De Beers Consolidated Mines in South Africa and immediately understood something most business owners of his era completely missed. Controlling a mine wasn't enough. You had to control the entire supply of the product on Earth. That mission was completed in the 1920s, when Ernest Oppenheimer, a diamond dealer who had built his own mining company Anglo-American, took control of De Beers and pushed the strategy further than Rhodes ever had. Common sense tells us that the only way to increase the value of diamonds is to make them scarce. Those were Oppenheimer's own words, not a marketing slogan, a literal operating instruction. At its peak, De Beers controlled somewhere between 80 and 90% of the entire global diamond supply. And control wasn't passive. It was aggressive, almost militant. When new mines were discovered, in Russia, Australia, or Canada, De Beers had one playbook: absorb the producer into the cartel, or flood their local market with cheap diamonds until they went bankrupt and had no choice but to join anyway. And when there was too much supply, when demand dipped and prices threatened to fall, De Beers simply stopped selling. It stockpiled billions of dollars worth of rough diamonds in vaults, waiting sometimes for years, rather than let the market ever see a surplus. This is the part most business case studies miss about monopolies. The real skill was never digging diamonds out of the ground. Any company can do that. The real skill was psychological, making sure supply never grew fast enough to catch up with a demand curve. De Beers itself was about to manufacture from nothing, because controlling the rocks was only half the empire. The other half required convincing the entire world it needed them in the first place. By the late 1930s, De Beers had a genuine problem. The Great Depression had crushed diamond sales, and in most of Europe, diamond engagement rings weren't even a tradition yet. So De Beers hired the NWR advertising agency in New York and gave them a single mandate: make diamonds not just desirable, but emotionally mandatory. In 1947, a young copywriter at the agency, named Francis Geraghty, wrote 4 words that advertising age would later crown the most successful slogan of the entire 20th century: "A diamond is forever." It wasn't really about the stone's durability. It was a message wrapped around your deepest anxiety about love. If this diamond lasts forever, doesn't that mean the relationship it symbolizes should too? The campaign didn't stop at slogans. De Beers seeded diamond rings into Hollywood films. They briefed newspaper columnists on appropriate ring sizes. And in the 1980s, they invented an entirely new rule. Out of thin air, a man should spend 2 months' salary on the ring. In Japan, where diamond engagement rings barely existed before De Beers arrived, the target was pushed to 3 months. There was no tradition behind any of these rules. There was no historical basis, no ancient custom. There was only a marketing department deciding what love should cost, and a planet quietly agreeing to pay it. Within 2 generations, an entire global ritual, the engagement ring itself, existed almost entirely because one company's ad campaign willed it into being. This is achievement anchoring's darker cousin, not tying a product to human achievement, but tying it directly to human love, so completely that the two became almost impossible to separate in the public imagination. For 60 years, it worked perfectly. Then the cartel that built it all started to crack. No empire holds 90% of anything forever, and De Beers's grip began slipping harder than any of its own ad campaigns ever let on. Massive new diamond deposits were discovered in Russia, Canada, and Australia. Through the late 20th century, for the first time, producers had somewhere else to sell besides the cartel. Some walked away entirely, choosing to compete on the open market instead of accepting De Beers's terms. The market share tells the story better than any headline could. From roughly 80% in 1990, De Beers's share of the global diamond trade fell to around 30% by 2010. Then came a second threat, one De Beers genuinely could not outmarket: lab-grown diamonds, chemically identical, visually indistinguishable, and dramatically cheaper. They started eating into a market built entirely on the illusion of natural scarcity. And alongside the market pressure came a reputational one: the blood diamond crisis. As conflict-funded stones from war zones exposed the brutal human cost, hiding behind 70 years of romantic advertising. In 2011, control of the company itself changed hands. Anglo-American bought out the Oppenheimer family's remaining 40% stake, ending 80 years of Oppenheimer control and becoming De Beers's majority owner, with the government of Botswana holding a 15% stake. Alongside them, the scarcity De Beers spent a century engineering had started working against itself. The company had built a machine so effective at manufacturing desire that when real competition finally arrived, it had no natural monopoly left to fall back on, only the story. And in 2026, even the company holding that story is walking away from it. Here's where this stops being history and becomes breaking news. In May 2024, Anglo-American announced it was putting its 85% stake into De Beers up for sale entirely, choosing to refocus on copper and other strategic metals instead of diamonds. The write-downs tell you how far the empire has fallen. Anglo-American booked a $2.9 billion impairment on De Beers in 2024, followed by another $2.3 billion hit in 2025, as weak natural diamond prices and the rise of lab-grown alternatives crushed the valuation of a company once worth more than most countries' GDP. But, and this is the twist, almost nobody saw coming. As the company itself lost value, the race to control it only intensified. Just this week, Anglo-American named its preferred buyer, a group called the Global Diamond Consortium. But the government of Botswana, which already owns 15% of De Beers and controls roughly 70% of its actual diamond production through a local joint venture, holds something the buyers can't ignore: a right of first refusal. Botswana can step in and match any offer, alone or with partners, and take the deal for itself. The country is reportedly in talks with sovereign wealth funds in the UAE and Oman to help finance exactly that. Diamonds still account for roughly 80% of Botswana's export earnings, and nearly a third of its entire GDP. Angola has separately signaled it wants a 20 to 30% stake of its own. What started as one British mining magnate cornering a global market in 1888 may end in 2026, with African nations fighting to reclaim control of the very diamonds mined from their own soil. The empire built on manufactured scarcity may be about to become scarce itself. So what does a 100-year-old diamond cartel actually teach a modern entrepreneur? 3 lessons, and none of them are really about diamonds. Lesson 1. Controlling supply only works until someone else controls their own. De Beers's 90% grip wasn't permanent, it was temporary, propped up by the absence of competition. The moment Russia, Canada, and Australia had somewhere else to sell, the empire's foundation started cracking, no matter how good the advertising still was. Lesson 2. A story can outlive the structure that built it. Even as De Beers's market share collapsed from 90% to 30%, the cultural rule it invented, that love requires a diamond, kept running almost entirely on its own momentum, decades after the company that created it lost real control of the market. Lesson 3. Manufactured scarcity is a loan, not an asset. It can build an empire faster than almost any other strategy, but eventually reality collects the debt. Lab-grown diamonds didn't need to beat De Beers's marketing. They only needed to expose what the marketing had been hiding the whole time. Most empires eventually face a reckoning where the story and the reality finally collide. De Beers has been having that reckoning in slow motion for 30 years, and it's culminating right now in 2026, with the empire itself finally changing hands. Not because the founders got it wrong, because no story, however brilliant, can control reality forever, not even one built to sell forever itself. If this changed how you'll look at your next diamond, subscribe to Empire Blueprint. We decode empires so you can build your own. One question before you go: was De Beers the greatest marketing campaign in history, or the biggest con? Tell us below. This was Empire Blueprint.